to another episode of Wholala.
Wholala. Hello.
And what's your name?
I think my name's... It's still Sam.
Oh, that's so funny. Mine's still Alasdair.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Here we are as well, the final episode of 2022.
I know. Well, actually, when this is coming out, it will be 2023. First episode 2023.
The very first episode of 2023. Ah, what a treat for listeners. They're in the future right now.
Alasdair, how was your New Year's that you're about to celebrate tonight?
God, you know what? I'm nervous. Once again, we talked about this before. When I was throwing the work Christmas party, I was in host mode the whole time. I'm actually a bit anxious for tonight. I woke up a bit nervous this morning, a deep-seated kind of something's wrong. And then as the morning went on, I realised everything's actually fine. But I have this funny fear, like when I'm hosting something at mine, I feel like everything's going to get broken, someone's going to steal from me. I trust no one. Like my flatmate, who I love, he's bringing like mostly his friends tonight, and the way I'm like, someone's gonna steal. Clearly, I don't like trust.
You do not
anyone.
trust his friends
like,
at all.
My valuables. But it's gonna be a great night. The police are too stretched
fun. I'm
to
excited.
turn up and respond to a noise complaint anyway. So
it'll be fine. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be fine.
You'll be there, and you can like. Be like, breathe. I'll be like,
I'm going to come up to you every so often with a drink. We also realised, as long as you're over the age of being able to drink, that apple rum and Fanta is a delicious alcoholic beverage. God. So I'll be coming up to you offering you those throughout the night.
It's so good. Actually, I forgot that's going to be our drink tonight. That makes me actually a little bit more excited when I remember that concoction. Last night, what was it? Yeah, Fanta and apple rum.
Fanta and apple rum, sliced apple rum.
Oh,
lovely.
So good. Guys, try it. I mean, too late now for you. You're listening in January. If you're doing dry January, my condolences as well.
And if you're not, there you go. Drink for you. Speaking of taking every moment as it comes and living life like there's no tomorrow, we're going to watch Father's Day.
Father's Day is a sad story about what if you manipulated a Time Lord into taking you to see your father's death and then saved your father, causing a paradox. And it's actually, well, it's one of the best ever episodes. I did a complete ranking. There's a website where you can say like, you do like a versus for every episode of Doctor Who. It took me ages. I regretted it, but by the time I was 15 minutes in, I couldn't stop. And Father's Day, I think, it came up in my top 10, I think, ever. Maybe top 5. I can't remember where it ranked, but it was pretty high up. Yeah,
no, for sure. I mean, like, I feel like, again, we always have to check ourselves nostalgia, but a few episodes in series 1 do, I think, still hold up as just like some of the best episodes of Doctor Who. I think Dalek is one. I think Father's Day is one. I don't think that Aliens of London is one. And this truly is, I think, one of like, it's some of the best writing of Doctor Who. The writer, I'll say the writer of this, it was Paul Cornell, and he's done lots of work on like Doctor Who novels. He's also written for Marvel and DC, but he's only ever written 2 other episodes of Doctor Who. And do you know what those 2 are?
Oh, I've got no idea actually.
Because I think these have been your top 5. They're actually Human Nature and Family of Blood.
Oh, I love those. That's honestly one of my favourite 2-parters. People get really surprised when I say that. It's the series 3.
I was really surprised when you said it.
Yeah, it's the ones with Martha and the Doctor's become human. I adore. Those are my comfort episodes, and I don't know why.
Really, really good. No, they're really good. And so the episode's written by Paul. It was directed by Joe Aheen. He's worked on a few dramas, and he's directed Doctor Who a few times, but only within series 1. He directed Dalek, this episode, Boomtown, Bad Wolf, and The Parting of the Ways.
What's funny about this episode as well is that often we've split this into a kind of the good, the bad, and then the fun facts. And I fear this is just the good, because this episode hits. And I had it playing in the living room this morning. It's so etched in my mind as well. There wasn't really any surprises. I wasn't going like, I forgot all about that. I was like, yep, word for word, I remember this one.
The same thing. I got halfway through a rewatch and I was like, I was like, should I even watch the rest? And I was like, no, I will. And I did. But I know this episode beat for beat. It's one of the ones that I always went to. It's in a weird way, it's sort of like a comfort episode, despite like how sad it is.
Yeah, if like someone said, rewrite it from memory, I could probably hit most of the major plot points, and maybe, I wouldn't get it line for line, but I'd be pretty close, I think.
I know. I mean, I actually wrote a little summary of the episode we can go through, but I wrote it before I did the rewatch, and then when I was doing it, I was like, oh, was there anything I missed? And I was like, no, I think I got it all.
No, dead on. Just an expert.
Dead on. Should we go through the plot of the episode before we go into our thoughts?
Go on, then.
Let's go. So this episode was released on the 14th of May 2005, and the plot goes as follows. Rose tells the Doctor that she wants to be with her dad Pete after knowing that he was hit in a car crash and died when she was a baby, but instead she uses the opportunity to save his life. Doing this, it changed a fixed point in time, causing the Reapers to come through, creatures who are meant to sterilise the wound of time by killing everyone in that timeline. The Doctor threatens to leave Rose in the 1980s, but once realising what's happened, he runs to go and find her. Rose attends a family wedding of Stuart Hoskins and Sarah Clark, where she meets a younger version of her mum Jackie and her boyfriend Mickey Smith. The Reapers start picking off the guests one by one until the Doctor realises he can use the TARDIS to get everyone out. However, when Rose damages time again by touching the younger version of herself, a Reaper appears in the church they were hiding and kills the Doctor. Pete realises the only way to heal time is to do what was meant to originally happen, allow the car to kill him. He tells Jackie who Rose really is and thanks Rose for all of his extra hours of life where he got a chance to see who his daughter grew up to be. He runs into the road and history plays out as it was meant to, bringing all the people the Reapers took back where they should be. Rose stays with Pete as he dies, changing history slightly so that he doesn't die alone.
Oh, this episode is so dark, but I got chills watching it, and I let me jump in and say, there are so many fucking catchphrases on this show at this point. Let me jump in.
If you had a little pull string version of you, it'd be like, can I just jump in?
Let me just jump in and say this. What I really love about this episode, and I think this is true of all media that really appeals to kids, is that it doesn't patronize them. It is dark, but in a way that is totally accessible to children. Like, one of your biggest fears as a child is losing your parents, and as well, a lot of kids deal with grief and losing a parent or losing a loved one, like when they're quite young. And I think this is what that explores. It's a very universal feeling that you understand from very early on. You can sympathize as a child with Rose's motivations here. It's quite a complex episode, but it's not one I think that's too much either. But it's entirely accessible for kids and adults. It deals with it in a very mature way.
I think this episode, I mean, first of all, I think this was the episode, I as a kid watching it, I loved Rose anyway, but this I think was the episode where I really fell in love with the character of Rose. And I think it does a really good job, because the last episode where Rose had kind of jumped in head first and she trusted Adam and made some bad choices and didn't really think of the consequences, and that follows through in here. And the Doctor has that line where he's like, I did it again, I picked another stupid ape. And he, I think at first is oh, she's just like Adam, she's just using this as an opportunity to benefit herself. But I think it really just shows the audience that Rose isn't perfect all the time, because so far she's pretty much just been making good choices. And here she does make a damaging choice, but I think it's for, I want to say an honourable reason. It's also a really relatable reason. I think like you said, we all have this, fear of losing a parent, and for something for her to go through when she suddenly is I have an opportunity to change this. I'm travelling with this man who saves people all the time. I now have the chance to save my dad. And she wouldn't think of the great consequences, I don't think. I think anyone, she's 19 years old. We'd all do the same thing.
You wouldn't be able to, of course you wouldn't be able to watch your parent die in front of you and just stand and watch. Of course you wouldn't.
But I love as well how I think it really shows the time travel aspect of the show, but it's really what would happen where Rose goes the first time and she can't do it. She just stands there and the Doctor's you'll go to him, that's what you want to do, you want to be with him when he dies. And she just stands there and it cuts to her crying and you hear the ambulance and she's it's too late, but please let me try again. And I think that's really relatable too.
I agree. I really love the flawed character of Rose in this. I love that she's not as polished as some of the later maybe Moffat era companions are. Some of the later era companions almost have a lot of zingers, and I like that Rose feels like a real person.
Fully.
Especially when she's arguing with the Doctor after this point. It's like you're watching a couple bicker.
Yeah.
And it's not it's like a real argument in the sense that she says oh, I know how sad you are. You know what I mean? It's it's not a good dig.
It's not a good dig.
It's an argument you'd regret. It's something you'd blurt out when you're emotional and you'd feel silly about saying afterwards.
Completely.
And then they have that kind of, oh, I'm sorry for getting angry later on.
Yeah.
And I really like that.
Me too. I think I actually really like companions say Clara, but I think you're right in that she's often written, I think it's also part of her character that she later becomes quite like the Doctor, but she's often really snappy and articulate and she comes out with one-liners a lot. And I think that it's not as it doesn't happen as often in the later seasons where you have real raw characters like this. I think another moment I'm thinking of is like maybe Donna in Turn Left when she's talking to Rose and she's like, what am I supposed to do? Like, what do you want me to do? I'm nothing. What do you want? Kind of, like you said, it's not a good argument. It's just something that you would blurt out and then later be like, probably could have said something better there.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's like, I feel like later on you get a lot of companions who say the perfect thing the first time.
Yeah.
And I like that in this, she does stuff that's quite emotional and messy, and but that feels very true to the situation. It would be the biggest bag of emotions possible in, you know, this horrible scenario. So I love that.
And I think especially, I mean, the character is 19 years old. Like, she really would be sort of emotions first, maybe thinking later. I've also realised, we were talking about this the other day, that Billie Piper is the age that we are like now when she was playing Rose then. And I'm suddenly like, oh my God. And then you think of Millie Gibson, who's like 19 now, which is how old Rose was meant to be. And I'm just like, well, that time's a construct.
The one who does have zingers, though, who does not mince her words and is so wonderfully sharp, is Jackie once again in this, our queen. She has so many great one-liners in this. You never used to like a mental, or maybe you did. And it's like,
oh my God.
And then,
I need an extra pair of hands. Where's that useless article of a father gotten to?
Yes, it's all of that. And there's the bits where there's moments where you forget the sci-fi and you just get into the domestics, but it's good. Like, just for a moment where like that double coat argument comes up and then Rose almost like forgets herself for a minute and she jumps in with were you playing around? And it's like, who are you to be caring if I, you know, blah, 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 blah.
That was so, I wrote a note. I was saying that it just, the episode becomes so layered where Rose is there and she can't tell them who she is, but then when she jumps in, she's like, were you playing around? And doesn't think about the fact that to Jackie that looks like she's like his side piece. And Jackie's like, what does it matter to you? And she's like, no, what does it matter to you what he gets up to? And Rose is like, well, what does he get up to? Because she's never heard about this. Jackie really told Rose stories of her father in the best, like he was the best man in the world, he was the best dad. And Rose, who is effectively like a young adult but still a child, is seeing all this and she's like, oh my God, it really wasn't all as shiny as I was taught it was. And she's like, it's all hitting her at once.
And on that, I imagine that the perspective of watching this as someone who's lost a parent must have really been quite an experience. I don't know if this is written by, I wonder if the writer had lost a parent when they wrote this, because there's something I like as well about, there's obviously this glossy sheen that she has on her dad to start, because she only has the story she was told, and her mum is protecting his memory by telling all these stories, and she has this very rosy image of the kind of person he would have been if only his life hadn't been kind of cut short. And she doesn't understand as well why later on kind of all the stuff is in boxes and why it's not on display.
Yeah.
Because she's like, but he was such a great guy, he was an inventor, he was so creative, he was kind of, he had all these mad inventions, and almost if he'd gone on a bit longer, he would have found the thing that made us rich. And ironically, in the parallel world, he would have, which is funny. It starts right from when, because initially they don't go to his death, they go to his wedding.
Yeah.
And the doctor's kind of there and just soaking it up, and he's laughing, and, you know, he gets the name wrong, and the doctor loves it.
Yeah.
But Rose spends the whole wedding frowning because it's not how she imagined it would have been.
Exactly.
And she's like, what? Like, and then when they do bicker and she sees them argue, it's like, but you're not like this.
Yeah.
And it's like,
you don't know
how they are.
Yeah. When they land on the day that he dies, literally the first thing she says, she's like, the day my father died, I sort of imagined it to be all grey and stormy. It's just an ordinary day. Because in her head, she's imagined all these scenarios exactly how she thought they'd be. And then when she sees how they are, she's like, oh, this isn't as I expected at all.
Yeah. And I guess in a way, this is the perfect time travel story, right? It's all about how we remember the past and how we have a habit to kind of gloss things over, and we create these lovely fuzzy memories. But when you can really see things in kind of, you know, stark color in front of you, it becomes something else. And as well, the way that in the end, that's how Pete realizes he should be dead. Rose doesn't want to be the one to say it to him, like, well, actually, you know, you're not alive in the future. She starts telling these stories about, you always took us to the countryside for picnics every Saturday. You never missed a story at bedtime, not even once. And he's like, that wouldn't have been me. Like, that's not
literally
that's not
that scene is, it's so sweet and so sad, because she's kind of been fed, I don't want to say these lies, but she's been fed this like lovely image of what their life was. and what she imagined would have happened if he hadn't died. And so she basically regurgitates that back to him, and she's like, you were the best dad, you were this, you were that. And he just sits there and he's just like, that's not me. That's not my life. And it's so sad. And I think that's where she really realizes, she's like, oh shit, I've kind of been told one thing, and what might have happened is something else.
There's a lot of humor in this episode as well, which really balances out the dark moments really nicely. So even when you've got this really haunting score playing over some of these really sad moments, you've got really good humor mixed in very delicately with it, and everyone plays it to perfection.
I think the dialogue that you're talking about with Jackie, I think Jackie is a really great use of humor in this. And she does bring like the weight at the end, but it's little moments where like Rose says, back in my time, Jackie can't even use the VCR player, and Pete's like, oh, I showed her that last week, and she's like, exactly.
Point taken. Or literally. When he's realizing that he's dead, and she's kind of just staring at him, and he's like, have I gone grey? Have I gone bald? And it's like,
relatable.
And he knows he's dead at that point. I think it's starting to click, and it's a bit like, oh, I'm bald. And it's like, come on, mate, you're not there at all.
Yeah, literally. I think it was really sweet seeing little kid Mickey, because especially in series 1, Mickey is so often shown as like the scaredy cat. He won't go with Dr. and Rose because he's too scared. He gets offered by the Doctor in Aliens of London, and he's like, no, I can't. And then, in episode 1, he's like hugging Rose, and in this you see that he just has always been a little ball of fear, so that then later in maybe like the Christmas Invasion, when he starts to grow a backbone, it really pays off, and he starts to really change his character. And I think in series 2 you then see him really like stand up for himself when he chooses to stay in the parallel world with Ricky. It just all kind of pays off.
It does. I'd also like to say Christopher Eccleston, I mean, he's a superstar, but in this he really is wonderful, because one of the things he does very well is the balance of the kind of the stern and the frightening Doctor who can kind of take control, and there are rules that have to be followed, and I think kind of plays the now we're really in trouble, kind of I haven't got a plan, between you and me, we're in trouble here. And the kind of furrowed brow, kind of scary Doctor. But then he has these really soft moments as well. So he kind of talks to the married couple and he says, yes, I'll try and save you. And it's like he says it very gently, even though he's kind of raging on the inside and presumably very scared and thinking, actually, I'm not sure I can save you. But he has that lovely kind of softness that goes with it as well. And that's where you get that kind of... I always say there's something very comforting about the Ninth Doctor, which is partly the nostalgia element for sure, just because we grew up with him and he was our Doctor, our first Doctor. But there is something very comforting about the portrayal that I'm not sure... I don't know if any Doctor after this has nailed it in quite the same way, that he gets the balance so right.
Yeah, I think that Christopher Eccleston, I know that there was a lot of drama behind the scenes, which we might look into in future episodes. He obviously didn't want to stay on for more than the one series, but I feel like we were kind of robbed, because he really is. I think so many people skip series 1 because the camera quality isn't great, and I think there are other jumping off points later in the series. But I think that by not watching series 1, that's why I hope at least doing this podcast might be doing for some people who haven't seen it in years, maybe like wanting them to rewatch it, because his portrayal of the Doctor really is incredible, and I think he has such the perfect balance of being really funny and cheeky and cheesy at points, but then he really does have the emotional weight and grounding of someone who you would be really quite scared of, I think. And the moment where he's like snapping at Jack, even that little scene with Jackie where he's like, I've always wanted to say that, after he goes, Jackie Tyler, do as I say. Within literally like one conversation, he's really funny, but then also very intimidating and authoritarian. And I think it just really shows then that there's also the bit when the key is hot, where they realise they might be able to use the TARDIS to save everyone. He takes his jacket off to hold the key. It's like he's naked when he's just got his green jumper on. It's like he's naked. Well.
He looked like a turtle without the shell. It was so weird.
Literally.
I realised how much the leather jacket is so key to his costume. His whole shape changes without it. It's quite jarring. You don't see him very often at all without that on, and it looks really wrong when he doesn't have it.
I know, it's really, really weird. There's very few moments off the top of my head. I don't think he's done it up until this point, and maybe he does like once more later. But when he takes off the jacket and still has the jumper on, it's so uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, it's super weird. So the last episode we did was obviously about soundtracks, and we have to say the music here is gorgeous. This is some of the very best work in it. A lot of it is just very soft, gentle melodies. and really sad music that adds so much to the performances and just kind of tips you over to what is already tragically sad and just makes it that little bit more difficult. But there's also some really good unsettling music within this. You get this kind of discordant music with these like almost like horror strings of just
harrowing,
just like something's wrong, something's off here, and it's really, really good. I love.
Really, really good. I feel like it's kind of like how we were saying in the soundtrack episode that Murray Gold, he has music that he just kind of like has incidentally throughout different episodes, but then certain episodes I think have such amazing, it's almost like that episode's theme, so you have a theme for Rose and a theme for the Doctor and whatever. I feel like the track Father's Day, it's not one they really use again, because a lot of these themes they then interweave into other episodes. I think Father's Day is one, I think Boomtown is another one, where it's really, you can just listen to the track and feel that episode in the same way that if you say listen to Donna's theme, you'd know who Donna was. Like, you know what this episode is when you're listening to it. It's so good.
I think now thinking maybe about some of the concepts introduced in this episode, I feel they hadn't quite worked out how time travel works yet, because they now have a little bit more of a flexible approach that you can kind of time travel and you can actually make a bit of a mess and you can change things and time kind of gets rewritten and bends around the things you've done. The Doctor's now quite lax about interrupting and interfering and becoming a part of events, whereas in this one it's very strict and you have to travel quite carefully, and the things the Doctor does in this series have quite intense consequences, this being one of them. But even later in the series, the actions in Long Game create kind of a 100-year stint for humanity where nothing happens because the Doctor kind of messed up by turning off all the feeds and there's no information for the human race for 100 years. And I feel like later on things tend to kind of bend around the things the Doctor does a little bit more. And the Reapers are a concept that never come back after this either. So it's meant to be kind of one of the consequences of the time war is the absence of Time Lords means that paradoxes can't be healed in the same way. But something we don't see again after this.
Yeah, I think it's interesting they never brought the Reapers back. I do think it's for the better, and I agree with you that I think it's that they hadn't really worked out time travel. So the Reapers are a very physical and dangerous aspect of meddling with time. But like, I think of maybe Peter Capaldi episodes where the forests grow all throughout London, or maybe later with Bill where there's the monks and the monks take over humanity and stuff. And to my memory, and I would be really interested to do the rewatch on it, they don't undo or reverse those things in the episode. They just kind of move on and they're like, well, that happened. And I feel like that would be an event where, that wasn't meant to happen and the Reapers might have come. But I think they sort of worked out later as the series went on what the effects of meddling with time would be, and I think it is a lot less sort of strict and stringent than it is in this series. But I also think that works because I think that reflects the Doctor that's just come out of the Time War, and it's like, we have to think of consequences. He has a really good line of dialogue in this where he says to Rose, because she's going, I'm just saving my dad, he's just one person, and he's like, I want to go back and save my family, but obviously I can't. If you never even thought that that's something I might want to do. And I think that that kind of consequence works with this kind of Doctor. I don't think that the Reapers would work so well in, say, a Jodie Whittaker episode.
You're right in that as well. This is another Time War parallel that I'd failed to recognise until you just said it. It's an obvious one, but it's another case of the, if I could go back and save them, don't you think I would? I hadn't thought of that either, that for the Doctor, this makes him, I guess, especially angry because she's doing one of the things that he knows is forbidden because he's desperate to do it too. Because he's lost so much. So I didn't think of that aspect of it as well. It's another kind of layer to the anger. In fact, if anything, Chris Eccleston probably could have dialed up the anger a little bit beyond what he did here, because you'd be fuming.
Well, I think this is the thing. He calls her, he's like, I did it again, I picked another stupid ape.
Yeah.
Because she's like, it's my dad, this is the most important thing to me, it's my dad. And he's just lost his entire world, species, family, all of his friends, and he's completely and totally alone. He's like, you're a monkey, you're doing this for one person.
Yeah.
But then I think again later when he does have that really soft scene where he apologizes to her, he has to realize his humanity, for want of a better word, and how this really is the most important thing to her.
Yeah. And what I like to imagine is when he says like, oh, well, the Time Lords, they would have stepped in here, they would have prevented this paradox. I like to imagine how the Time Lords would have done that. I like to imagine that it's just like some random, like, Romana has to like step in or whatever, and she's like, right, what's happening here? Okay, right, dead dad, fine. And then she just chucks him in front of the car, and she's like, dealt with.
Can you imagine the Time Lords coming in like the TVA from Loki, where this little square just pops up and like the Rani comes through and she's like, you're meant to die, you've got to die, and she just like offs him
like with a gun. No, I like to imagine the Time Lords would have literally turned up and shoved Pete Tyler in front of the car and been like, done, right, we're off, back in TARDIS.
Back at TARDIS, all right, off pop.
Or indeed, one of the Time Lords is driving their own little car.
Oh my god, yeah, no, the thing is they knew that Rose and the Doctor were going to go and Rose would save him, so hours before they like go to an Enterprise, they get a little KA, they're going around the corner and they time it, so just as Rose pushes Pete out of the car, they just drive past in their KA, knock him again, and then off they go.
That a second driver has hit Pete Tyler.
Oh, bless him, it's not Pete's day. That stupid Vase. Mum always said, if it wasn't for that stupid Vase.
You could have a comedy compilation as well of Time Lords like trying to work out how to drive a manual because they're not used to, to human technology.
They thought it was an automatic.
I told you, I only know how to drive automatic.
Oh, bloody hell, they've gone put me in a stick.
Dark comedy where the Time Lord doesn't kill Pete Tyler because they didn't drive fast enough and they have to run him over a second time. So
the whole episode, it's the plot of Father's Day, but they're about 100 feet away working out how to kill Pete.
He's so funny and so awful.
It's really bad, but I can just imagine them with like, they have a gun on him and they shoot it, but they realise it's a Nerf gun because they don't know what Earth weapons look like.
I would love to see, I mean, like, I think you could bring back the Time Lords one more time and leave them back this time.
Not one more time.
And I think there's so many funny things you can do with the Time Lords. Like, so like this is way off topic.
Yeah.
But I think this is how I'd reintroduce the Time Lords if you were ever to do this. There's something within the Doctor Who lore which is called the 9 Gallifreys Project, which is meant to be something that the Time Lords did at the start of the Time War, where to kind of keep themselves safe, they created 8 duplicates of Gallifrey, and these are all kind of fake Gallifreys scattered around that would be decoys that could be destroyed kind of instead of their own planet.
Yeah.
So the Daleks would just be kind of focusing on blowing up the wrong place. And in my mind, the Master never destroyed the real Gallifrey. Like, you could say the Master basically destroyed a Gallifrey, or indeed or was just posing on a Gallifrey that was already destroyed, and then put that in the spot the Doctor would expect to find it. And that the in my mind, my excuse would be that the Master's not actually powerful enough to destroy the Time Lords, and just pretended he had, just to kind of mess with the Doctor. So that'd be my out.
That would be really cool, actually, because I was thinking about it. The Master has been captured by the Time Lords before, a lot in Classic Who. I don't think the Master has the power to completely wreak havoc in the same way that, like, Gallifrey looked like how it looked after the Time War in that clip. And I love the idea of the Master just opening up a pocket of time after the Time War and just being like, I did it! And the Doctor's like, no, you did it! And he's like, yeah, I did it.
I honestly, I like to believe it was a trick and that he never did and never would. Because I think the Master was horrified by the Time War as well. So I mean, for me, like, the second destruction of Gallifrey didn't make any sense in the first place, and it needs to be undone. But my plot here for a spin-off with the Time Lords, when you've saved them, would be the idea that they've kind of emigrated now. They've left behind the old Gallifrey. The High Council got ejected in Hellbent. The President's gone. Rassilon's gone. So you'd have kind of the Time Lords rebuilding a society. Time Lords, this is quite a developed concept, but Time Lords are famously arrogant. They almost don't know how their own technology works anymore because they're such an advanced civilization. They kind of actually don't know how their own tech works anymore. It's become like magic to them, and they're afraid of some of it. Like, the moment is Time Lord tech that they're scared to use because it's kind of outwits them. Yeah, so I kind of like the idea that the Time Lords would have their own refuge somewhere where they're sort of in hiding. They're kind of sort of rebuilding their own society after the Time War, but maybe have a completely different set of values now. And I like the idea that maybe some of those Time Lords would actually start kind of doing a little bit of a mimicking of the Doctor, and they're like, well, listen, like, this guy's become something of a hero to us. Let's see what he's up to. Let's just kind of like, let's see if we could. I'm going to take a TARDIS too. Let me take a peek. And they start trying to like integrate aspects of human society into like new Gallifrey. but they kind of butcher it. So they're like, we're going to do Christmas, but they don't really know why they do it, and they don't really get it. And so they kind of like...
It's literally like in the Guardians holiday special when they're singing a song and they're like, no, nothing in this is actually correct. Or like in Voyage of the Damned, where he's like, the people of Great Britain go to war with the people of Turkey.
Exactly.
They then eat the Turkey people.
I would love
the
that.
Doctor's
like basically Time Lords
no.
who don't completely get it. Like, they like it, and they're like, oh yeah, there is something kind of appealing about this Earth that he keeps going to, but they don't quite get it in the same way.
For sure. I would like them to put the most recent master as a master that was a regeneration before Missy, because you never saw anyone regenerate into him, and you never saw Missy regenerate. So, and I think that was actually a throwaway comment, I believe, in the first time that we saw Missy, when Missy met the Doctor, where she said something like, you left me lying there to die. And obviously the most recent master was lying there dying when they left the Doctor. And everyone always moans about the arc, because the master's arc, well, Missy's arc with 12, where they sort of realised, at least to an extent, that maybe they don't want to be this evil antithesis of the Doctor. Maybe they want to try and do something good, and there was a real like change to then suddenly jump back to, I'm the evil master and I'm going to kill everyone. They were like, whoa, you've just ruined all of that character development. I would love Missy to come back, but not in like a new regeneration thing, to be like, no, I was the one that regenerated from him. And then she tells the Doctor, like, even if it's just like a one-off special where Missy's back for like a little bit, she then tells the Doctor, she'd be like, okay, yeah, I've got something to confess to you. And it is that she, as the master, had like jumped in at the end.
I can't believe you fell for it.
I never did it. Ooh, sorry, it's fine.
Sorry.
Have you? And then she does something I can imagine like to Shooty. Have you actually looked for it? And Shooty's like, you destroyed it. And she's like, did you never even look? And then he like flies the coordinates, and Gallifrey's fully there and fine.
Yeah. I honestly, I think give it a good break. I think the Master needs a break, and I think Gallifrey needs a break. I think they need to not come back for like another 2 or 3 series yet. But if they did, I think there's loads of fun things you could do with it. Like Doctor Who lore isn't real. There's no canon. Do what you want. Have a laugh.
Yeah. One last thing, I think we'll go into fun facts in a sec, but one last thing that I noticed, and I think this is from doing the rewatches, is that the flat that Peter's in, I always thought it was like his own flat that like him and Jackie lived in, and then she moved to the Powell estate. It's not. It is the same flat that the Tylers are in later. It's just obviously painted differently and used in a different way for like more like the 80s. So it's interesting to think that Jackie stayed there and never moved. But I also wasn't sure again if it was a different flat, because they have used that flat so many times. So it's the Tylers flat in present day. It's Pete's flat in the 80s. It's also Mickey's flat, which isn't meant to be the same building. It's just redressed, but it is still the same flat. And I was just watching it and I was like, this flat is getting a lot of screen time in this series in lots of different ways.
Yeah, budget, right?
Yeah. So yeah, no, I think it's only something from watching the rewatches I've realised just how much, because of the budget, they've had to like reuse locations and flats and stuff.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. Rose is painfully naive in this scene as well, when she's like, the Doctor is there like fuming, absolutely about to go off on her. She's like, oh, bowling prize, 3rd place. And then he's like, oh, I've done it again. And he gets all angry, and then she's like, I'll tell him you're not my boyfriend. I was like, bitch, that is not the issue here.
Yeah, literally. He's like, I do not give a flying fuck what you call your dead dad, about what we are. You have just
he does not care. This man is meant to be dead.
Oh my god bless. Oh, Alasdair, would you like to hear some fun facts about this episode?
Every single time you offer them, I'm going to take them.
Oh, I'll give you a couple fun facts. So Simon Pegg, who we all know played the editor in the non-game, was originally cast as Pete Tyler, but due to scheduling conflicts, they couldn't get it to work. So he said that he would take the role of the editor in the episode previous, because it meant that he could film it.
Oh, he would have been brilliant actually as Pete Tyler. That would have really worked.
It would have been really good. I do wonder if they would have then been able to get him back because he's in 4 episodes in the next series, although this is the only time we ever see like the quote-unquote real world, like our world Pete Tyler. We only ever see him once, but then obviously the actor comes back next season for 4 episodes. I wonder if they'd have got him back.
I feel like they could have maybe afforded him. He seems like he's about the right level for this.
So Shaun of the Dead had come out and Hot Fuzz hadn't, so you're right, yeah, he probably would have been fine.
Would have been fine.
This one I find really interesting. So Russell T Davies and Paul Cornell, the writer, they debated whether or not they'd make it obvious if Rose had always planned to save the Doctor, as the Doctor kind of like says to her, he's like, I asked you to travel in space with me and you said no, but then I said time machine. They were debating about whether making it explicit that she had always had that as a plan, like from the beginning, and they decided to leave it more ambiguous. Billie Piper has said that she feels like it didn't even occur to Rose until she started traveling with the Doctor. She hadn't planned on it from the first episode, but I had always read it in this episode that she did not decide to do this until the moment she did it. Like, I always read it like until she was stood there looking at it and it clicked that she could stop it, she decided to. But Billie thinks that during her travels with the Doctor, she was like, I could probably save my dad, and that's why she then asked him to go back and see her dad.
I think it actually does remain ambiguous because I've got a different reading, which is that there's a moment where you see young Rose, Jackie's talking to young Rose, and there's a bit of voiceover from the TARDIS, which is Rose saying, I want to be that person. There was no one by his side. And it's almost as if young Rose is the one thinking that for the first time in her childhood. I wish I could have been that person. And so I feel like there was probably always something happening on some level where there was always some wish. I wish someone could have been with him and I wish it could have been me.
Yeah.
So I think it probably occurred to Rose somewhere that even seeing her dad and being by his side would have always been something she wished she could have done, even if it wasn't a wish. I think saving him was impulsive.
That's
what she'd always wanted to go back and see him.
No, I agree with that. I think she had always, as a child, wanted someone to be there, and then when she realised she could be that person, gone into the situation wanting that. And I think it was an impulsive decision to save him. This has also been noted as one of Billie Piper's favourite episodes of Doctor Who. And one final interesting fact that I thought were the Reapers went through many designs once they were introduced. Originally, Russell had said he didn't want any monsters in this episode. He wanted to be much more of just like a mystery drama about Rose discovering the truth about her dad's death. And I think at the BBC they were like, no, this is Doctor Who, you need monsters. So they introduced the Reapers, and originally they were going to be men in cows based on the Grim Reaper. So there were going to be multiple just men that looked like the Grim Reaper, hence the name the Reapers.
Oh, I don't know about that.
No, neither do I. They said that they thought they looked too much like the aliens from the End of the World. Do you remember those big, almost bird-like aliens with the big cows? So they went through and changed their design. But the word Reaper is never actually said on screen. They're names that have been given to the aliens, but they never actually called them it on screen.
Oh, how interesting. That's a bit of a Mandela effect moment. You'd assume that someone had said it at some point, but...
Yeah, like the Doctor going like, Rose, you've released the Reapers.
The Reapers. Oh no, the Reapers.
Oh, the Reapers. But yeah, no, they never said.
God, what a cracker. This is definitely one of the best episodes. This and Dalek are some of the best Doctor Who we've ever got, I think.
I truly believe
this season is an all-time favourite for those. It's, absolute classic.
It's a corker, an absolute corker of a season.
I have to say, next week, the standard stays pretty high.
It really does. I am very excited for what's coming up. Alasdair, are you my mummy?
Yeah, baby. I'll be your mummy.
I'll be your mummy if you want me to.
be.
Oh, stop it. Yes, we will soon be looking at The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances. But before that, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Wholala.
Oh, God, yeah, we hope you loved it.
I hope you loved it. As always, you can keep the conversation going on our Twitter and Instagram, both at Wholala Pod. You can rewatch old episodes of the podcast on our YouTube channel, the Wholala, a Doctor Who podcast. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to having you with us next week.
Thanks, everyone. We hope you have a very lovely start to 2023. We're not there yet, but you are. So, have a lovely time.
Have a lovely new year, and we look forward to seeing you next week and next year.
See you soon.
Bye.